Peace, family, and welcome to another Drapetomaniac podcast. I'm Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is, the head Drapetomaniac in charge, and we're here to have conversations on how to get off this plantation. I'm sure that anyone who has any age or experience on them have found themselves in situations where you're trying as hard as you can to tell someone something as politely as you can to do one thing or the other, or that a situation is one way or the other.
Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that you listeners are listening to the Drapetomaniac podcast on doayamedia.com. You are, right?
Whether it's someone who is interested in you, but you don't have the least bit of interest in them, but you try to be nice and do what you can to keep from hurting their feelings or whatever. Or maybe it's someone who you don't even really know well, but you're telling them you don't need their help, or that you would rather do something for yourself, or whatever the situation is. You first just keep dropping hints after hint, politely as you can, and they yet still continue to persist because they don't get they don't get what you're trying to say. Next, you give them signals that might be a little bit stronger, and you feel that you're making it clear that there's no way that they can't understand what you're trying to say, but still they persist. And then ultimately, you just tell them rudely and bluntly, in no uncertain terms, what it is that you mean, so that there is no way that they misunderstand what you're saying. Sometimes even to the point of swearing, you're trying to get them to understand what it is that you're trying to say, or what you're saying and what you're meaning. Most of the time, people get it, but sometimes, even then, surprisingly, miraculously, they still don't get the point. And you're looking at them like they're crazy. It's like, brother, how dense are you? That you don't, what part of no, or get away from me, or I don't want your help, or I don't want to be around you, don't you understand? Joe Biden chose Kamala Harris as his running mate. Forget the fact that he has a long documented history of racism when it comes to black people, and as recently as this week, said in no uncertain terms that black people are monolithic. Not only does his pick as a running mate confirm what his handlers vehemently denied, but also serves as a big F you to our people, and in a way that you can't possibly misinterpret it. The thesis and their way of thinking is that picking her sold up the black vote, with absolutely no need to do anything actually for our people. Now, here's a prediction that I gave to my wife. I think it was yesterday, and I really mean this. Right now, you have both parties basically doing everything that they can to let black people know that we do not matter to them, that we don't matter at all, that we don't matter in the system. We think we do. We want to think we do. But they are doing everything they can to tell us, you know what, you don't matter. I predict, and when it happens, it may take some years, but when it happens, just remember, Ayapo said it first. There's going to come a point where these politicians just outright say that we don't matter. They're not gonna like beat around the bush. They're not gonna do like all these little subtle things to try. It's gonna be just like that situation where you're trying to politely tell somebody something and they just won't get it through their slick skull, and then eventually you just say, "Darn!" You don't say "darn," you say, "Damn it! This is what it is." And I'm saying that that's the situation that will happen with us, is that they will finally, at some point, see that we don't really move the gauge one way or the other for them. And they'll just let us know to our face that we don't matter, as opposed to playing all these games. And then hopefully at that point, our people will finally wake up. And the sad thing is, There will always be people who you can be that blunt with them and they still won't get it. And they still won't believe it. And we will have some of those too. I don't vote. There was a time that I did. I haven't voted in years. And keep this in mind. Black people proportionately have always turned out in large numbers to vote, especially during the Obama elections when we helped get him elected so that he could turn around and piss on us both times. And yes, I stupidly voted for him twice too. Yet nothing fundamentally changes for our people. While, for instance, Asians have the lowest turnout proportionately. And I looked this up. And guess who is presently the highest earning racial group in the United States today? Right, Asians. Who received reparations for being placed in internment camps from 1944 to 1945 and received reparations for that 1 year of mistreatment? Who had organizations that helped them to get reestablished back into the community and given real protection under the law so that they could once again prosper? Who is allowed to have their own countries within a country, and I'm talking about in the United States, and not have them burned down and blown up or being constantly attacked? Asians, and specifically the Japanese when it comes to the subject of actually receiving reparations. Even George Takei, who played Sulu on Star Trek, received reparations because he was in an internment camp when he was a young child around 5 years old or so. Also, keep in mind, in internment camps, they were not forced to do free labor. They weren't being beaten, lynched, raped, and terrorized. They just weren't allowed to leave. That's not saying it was all right. It's just saying that nothing compares to the horror our people dealt with and continue to deal with. And that even the mention of reparations makes white people become apoplectic. So Asians are the smallest voting bloc, but they get their needs attended to, even if just by proxy. We march, protest, yell, scream, vote, get beaten down over the head, tear gassed, thrown in jail, and not a damn thing changes. So why do we turn out in droves to vote? To change things? What has changed? I mean really changed. I'm not talking about some cosmetic, symbolic bullshit that even if it does manage to help our people, it actually helps everyone else too, which means that it's no help for our people at all. Or things that start out supposedly for our people, but ultimately end up serving everyone else more than it does us. Affirmative action being a prime example of this. It seems to me that our people have a difficult time grasping that when we start allowing into the discussion people of color, gender, sexual orientation, etc., that it absolutely destroys anything that could have served our people specifically and addressed our needs. And that is why politicians are so willing to allow it, because they know it won't serve our people. Kamala Harris, she is not a descendant of enslaved Africans in America. I don't know what frustrates me more, that our people are constantly insulted, or that many of us don't even know when we're being insulted. Miss me with that tired old line of our ancestors fought and some of them died for us to have the right to vote. So even if we only vote locally or third party, we still should vote out of respect for what they did. I used to say that all the time to our people, but I have come to realize something. Point of view and point of reference. Example, if I fought and fought and fought and finally died so that I or my family could go into a certain restaurant, and then years later the restaurant opens the doors to my family, but whenever they were in there, they would be mistreated, their food would be spat in, they would only be allowed to sit at the back near the bathroom that had no door so that they could smell everything while they were eating their lower quality food that they were served. And what if it was my son who was going in there and taking his family? What if people said to him, hey dude, don't go in there. When you take your family, all they do is treat you like straight garbage. And have my son say, I'm going in because my father fought and died for me to be able to go in there and eat. And out of respect for his memory and what he did, I'm going. That sounds like the right and noble stance to take, but I submit that were my spirit able to see him, his wife, and my grandchildren, and the way that they were being treated inside, if I loved my family at all, I would say, no, son. I thought going in there would be something different, but I was wrong. You would better honor my memory and yourself and your family by never going in there again. Once again, I submit that our ancestors did the very best that they knew based on the circumstances and situations within their degree of knowledge at the time. They had no way to know that seeking to integrate into this system was a complete and total illegitimate sham and a trick box. And so, with a point of reference, they would likely think more in line with Marcus Garvey and abandon the misguided hope of integrating or even being treated equally or with dignity and respect within this cesspool of a society, and better spend their energies in getting away from it and doing for themselves and finding their own peace and dignity. I wince when I see our people pushing to put Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. What black person with any degree of consciousness would think that she would want her picture on this filthy money? The money for which our people were enslaved and for which we are still oppressed and subjugated. She would roll over in her grave, and it would be another useless, worthless, symbolic gesture. It wouldn't be a win. The same, I believe, goes for our ancestors when they see us turning out in droves to vote, in hindsight, knowing what they know now. I believe in my deepest heart that they would tell us collectively that they had made a mistake, but they could not have known it at that time that it was a sham, and that we should seek to separate by any means necessary. So again, you can miss me with that our people fought and died for that right. Yes, they did, and they did so out of ignorance. I don't mean that disrespectfully, just in terms of the fact that they could not have known better back then. But guess what? Now we do. And I say, honor them by no longer adding legitimacy to this illegitimate system. This society uses every possible way to keep our people engaged while giving us nothing but terror, and voting and being engaged in politics and this illegitimate system of white supremacy is, as James Baldwin said to Dick Cavett, you want me to be an accomplice to my own murder. They take money that we earn through taxes and bomb and murder black and brown people both here and abroad, as well as paying for the same police forces that terrorize and murder us. Our solution? Go out and vote for the people who will continue to perpetrate it. I determined some time ago that separating from this system is the only solution for our people, not seeking to integrate further into it. Don't be fooled. Trump is being painted as this person who the actual devil kneels to, when the truth is that when it comes to all these politicians, and I mean all of them, choosing between Biden and Trump is like the difference between choosing a sociopath who's going to murder you with a chainsaw while he's wearing a yellow t-shirt and a sociopath who's going to murder you with a chainsaw while they're wearing a green t-shirt. I don't vote. I don't do anything to legitimize this illegitimate system. I will not be made an accomplice to my own murder. Thank you for listening to this edition of the Drapetomaniac Podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is, the head Drapetomaniac in charge, wishing you peace and blessings and safety to you and your family. And until next week at this same time, I'll see you on the run.
And thank you again for listening to the Drapetomaniac Podcast. Tune in next week at doiamedia.com. DOEAIAMEDIA.com. And again, we'll catch you on the run. Peace.